The ivory invitation felt like poison in Rebecca's hands. Her fingers trembled as she read the elegant calligraphy announcing the wedding of Marcus Chen and Vivian Drake, to be held at the prestigious Rosewood Estate on the 15th of June. The same Marcus who had left her standing at their engagement party 3 years ago. The same Vivian who had been her supposed best friend since college. Rebecca knew exactly why they had sent her this invitation. It wasn't an olive branch or a mature attempt at reconciliation. It was cruelty dressed up in expensive cardstock and gold leaf edges. They wanted her there to witness their triumph, to see her reduced to the pitiful ex-girlfriend watching from the pews as her former fiancé married the woman who had stolen him away. They wanted her humiliated, broken, alone. What they didn't know would destroy them. Rebecca set the invitation on her kitchen counter and looked around her modest but warm apartment. The living room had been transformed over the past months into something that resembled organized chaos. 3 cribs stood against one wall, a changing table occupied the corner, and toys in primary colors were scattered across the carpet like confetti. From the nursery down the hall came the sound of gurgling and the occasional small cry. She walked to the nursery and gazed down at the 3 tiny faces looking up at her. Emma, with her shock of dark hair and serious brown eyes. Oliver, already showing signs of his father's strong jawline even at 8 months old. And little Sophie, the smallest but fiercest of the trio, who had fought her way into the world first, despite being baby C. The triplets had been the shock of Rebecca's life. After Marcus had abandoned her, she had thrown herself into her work as a software engineer with reckless determination. She had attended a tech conference in Seattle, spent one night with a charming venture capitalist named David, who had been kind and funny and understanding when she told him she wasn't looking for anything serious. He had respected that, exchanged numbers, and they had parted ways. 6 weeks later, the pregnancy test showed 2 pink lines. 8 weeks after that, the ultrasound revealed 3 heartbeats. Rebecca had tried to contact David immediately, but his number no longer worked. Her searches on social media came up empty. Apparently, David Chen was either a very private person or had given her a false name. She had made peace with single motherhood, had prepared herself mentally and emotionally for the challenge ahead. But fate, it seemed, had a twisted sense of humor. 2 months ago, David had found her. He had remembered her company name and tracked her down, wanting to apologize for disappearing. He had been in a serious car accident the week after their night together, had spent months in recovery, and had lost his phone in the crash. When Rebecca opened her door to find him standing there, her pregnant belly enormous, he had been shocked. When she told him about the triplets, he had been stunned. To his credit, David hadn't run. He had stepped up in every way that mattered. He insisted on being involved, on supporting her financially and emotionally. As they spent more time together preparing for the baby's arrival, something unexpected had bloomed between them. It wasn't the wild passion of a whirlwind romance, but something steadier and deeper. By the time the triplets were born via C-section at 34 weeks, David had moved into her apartment, and they had become a genuine family. Now, holding Vivian and Marcus's wedding invitation, Rebecca felt something she hadn't expected: peace, and perhaps just a small spark of vengeful satisfaction. "You know what?" she said to David that evening as he fed Oliver while she burped Emma and Sophie dozed in her bouncer. "I think we should go to this wedding." David looked up, surprised. He knew the whole story, had held her through tearful nights when she recounted how Marcus had announced at their engagement party, in front of all their friends and family, that he couldn't marry her because he had fallen in love with Vivian. How Vivian had stood there, smug and victorious as Rebecca's world crumbled. "Are you sure?" David asked carefully. "You don't owe them anything." "I know," Rebecca said, smiling as Emma let out a satisfied burp. "But they invited me because they wanted to see me broken and alone. I think they should see what my life actually looks like now." Understanding dawned on David's handsome face, and he grinned. "You want to bring the babies?" "All 5 of us," Rebecca confirmed. "One happy, chaotic family." The weeks leading up to the wedding were a whirlwind of preparation. Rebecca had to admit she was nervous. Facing Marcus and Vivian would stir up old wounds, no matter how healed she believed herself to be. But every time she looked at her 3 babies, at David's steady presence, she remembered that she had won the lottery in ways that had nothing to do with revenge. She bought a dress that actually fit her post-triplet body, a deep emerald green that made her eyes shine and somehow made her look both elegant and maternal. David insisted on a new suit. They arranged for backup supplies, practiced their timing with the triplets' feeding and napping schedule, and RSVP'd yes to the wedding with a note that she would be bringing her partner and family. The day of the wedding arrived with perfect June weather. The Rosewood estate was as magnificent as Rebecca remembered from the photos Vivian had once shown her, back when they were still friends, and Vivian had dreamed aloud about having her wedding there someday. The irony wasn't lost on Rebecca. They arrived during the cocktail hour before the ceremony, when guests were mingling in the garden. Rebecca had timed it perfectly. She wore Emma in a sling against her chest while David pushed the double stroller containing Oliver and Sophie. The babies were dressed in coordinating outfits. Emma in a tiny green dress that matched Rebecca's, the other two in miniature suits. The reaction was immediate. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. Heads turned. Rebecca recognized faces from her past life, friends who had sided with Marcus and Vivian, colleagues who had witnessed her humiliation, family friends who had pitied her. None of them were pitying her now. Rebecca? The voice belonged to Marcus's mother, Eleanor, who approached with wide eyes. Are those... Hello, Eleanor, Rebecca said warmly. Yes, these are my triplets, Emma, Oliver, and Sophie, 8 months old. And this is David, my partner. Eleanor looked like she might faint. She had always liked Rebecca, had been devastated when Marcus broke off their engagement. Now she stared at the babies with undisguised longing. Marcus was her only child, and these grandchildren would never be hers. They're beautiful, Eleanor whispered, reaching out tentatively to touch Emma's tiny hand. The baby grabbed her finger, and Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. Oh, Rebecca, I'm so sorry for what happened, but it looks like you're happy. I am, Rebecca said, and meant it. Very happy. Word spread through the garden like wildfire. Rebecca watched as people pulled out phones, as whispers turned to excited chatter. She moved through the crowd with David at her side, graciously accepting congratulations, answering questions about the babies, radiating contentment. She saw Vivian first. The bride-to-be was resplendent in a white pre-wedding dress, her blonde hair perfectly curled, her makeup flawless. She was holding court near the rose arbor, surrounded by bridesmaids, when someone pointed toward Rebecca. Vivian's head snapped around, and her face went through a remarkable transformation: shock, disbelief, and then naked fury. Rebecca simply smiled and adjusted Emma's sling. Vivian stormed across the garden, her bridesmaids trailing behind like confused ducklings. She stopped short when she got close enough to see the babies clearly, her mouth opening and closing like a fish. You brought babies to my wedding? Vivian finally managed, her voice shrill. You invited me to your wedding, Rebecca replied calmly. The invitation said Rebecca and guest. I brought several guests. I hope that's not a problem. Vivian's perfect makeup couldn't hide the red flush creeping up her neck. This is inappropriate. This is my day. And I'm here to celebrate it, Rebecca said sweetly. Congratulations, by the way. I'm genuinely happy that you and Marcus found each other. It clearly worked out for the best for everyone. The sincerity in her voice seemed to throw Vivian off balance. This wasn't the broken, devastated Rebecca she had expected. This wasn't someone she could triumph over. How many babies? Vivian asked, her voice strangled. 3 triplets. And the father? Vivian's eyes cut to David with barely concealed venom. David stepped forward, placing a protective hand on Rebecca's back. That would be me, David Chen. Pleasure to meet you, though I've heard quite a bit about you. The way he said it made it clear that nothing he had heard was positive. Vivian recoiled as if slapped. Before she could respond, Marcus appeared. He looked older than Rebecca remembered, his face creased with stress lines that hadn't been there 3 years ago. When he saw Rebecca, he stopped dead in his tracks. Becca, he said, using the nickname he had no right to anymore. Marcus, she acknowledged coolly. Congratulations. His eyes dropped to Emma, then to the stroller, and she watched his face go pale. You have children. I do, 3 of them. Isn't it wonderful? Something flickered across Marcus's face that looked almost like regret. He stared at the babies with an intensity that made Rebecca uncomfortable, then looked at David with poorly concealed jealousy. I didn't know you were seeing anyone, Marcus said. The audacity of the statement almost made Rebecca laugh. Marcus, you broke up with me 3 years ago and married my best friend. My life stopped being your business the moment you announced you were in love with Vivian at our engagement party. That's not fair, Vivian interjected. We couldn't help falling in love. You're the one who what? Rebecca interrupted, her voice sharp for the first time. Who moved on? Who built a life? Who found happiness? Yes, Vivian. I did. And I brought that happiness here today because you invited me. If seeing me content ruins your wedding, well, that says more about you than it does about me. Oliver chose that moment to start fussing, and David immediately bent to check on him, his movements practiced and gentle. The contrast between David's immediate paternal response and Marcus's obvious discomfort around the babies wasn't lost on anyone watching, and people were watching. A crowd had gathered, drawn by the drama like moths to flame. Rebecca recognized many of them. These were the same people who had watched her public humiliation 3 years ago. Now they were watching something very different. Eleanor pushed through the crowd, having fetched Marcus's father, Robert. "Marcus," Robert said quietly, "perhaps you and Vivian should go prepare for the ceremony. I'm sure Rebecca and her family will find their seats." It was a diplomatic exit, and Marcus seized it gratefully. But as he walked away, he kept looking back at the babies with an expression Rebecca couldn't quite read. Vivian, however, was less subtle. "This isn't over," she hissed at Rebecca before stalking off, her white dress swishing dramatically. Rebecca just smiled and bounced Emma gently. "I think it actually is," she murmured. The ceremony itself was beautiful, Rebecca had to admit. The Rosewood Estates chapel was adorned with white roses and flowing tulle. Soft music played as guests took their seats, and the late afternoon sun cast everything in a golden glow. Rebecca and David sat in the back with the babies, prepared to make a quick exit if any of the triplets became fussy. As it turned out, the babies were perfect angels. They cooed and babbled quietly during the ceremony, drawing smiles from nearby guests. When the officiant asked if anyone objected to the union, Sophie let out a loud, gleeful shriek that had the entire chapel laughing. Even the officiant cracked a smile. Rebecca caught Vivian's murderous glare from the altar and had to suppress a laugh, but it was during the vows that Rebecca felt the full weight of what she had escaped. Marcus's vows were flowery and dramatic, full of declarations about soulmates and destiny and overcoming obstacles. They felt performative, like he was trying to convince himself as much as Vivian. Vivian's vows were worse. They included a thinly veiled reference to finally getting what she deserved and winning the greatest prize. Rebecca felt David's hand tighten on hers, his jaw clenching. "She's really something," he whispered. "She really is," Rebecca agreed. "And I really dodged a bullet." The reception was when things truly fell apart. The dinner was served under an elegant tent in the garden, tables decorated with centerpieces of white hydrangeas and candles. Rebecca and David were seated at a table in the back, clearly Vivian's attempt to hide them. But it didn't matter. People kept approaching their table, cooing over the babies, asking Rebecca questions, completely ignoring the head table where Vivian and Marcus sat. Rebecca could see Vivian's frustration mounting with each person who left her table to visit the triplets. The bride was being upstaged at her own wedding by 3 8-month-old babies and their glowing mother. Then came the speeches. Marcus's best man gave a rambling toast about true love conquering all, which felt awkward given the circumstances. Vivian's maid of honor gave a speech that was aggressively focused on Vivian's beauty and success, barely mentioning Marcus at all. Then Eleanor stood up. Rebecca hadn't known Marcus's mother planned to speak. By the look on Marcus's face, neither had he. "I want to say something," Eleanor began, her voice carrying across the tent. "I know this is unconventional, but I've been thinking about what makes a successful marriage all afternoon." Vivian preened, clearly expecting praise. "Marriage isn't about grand gestures or perfect moments," Eleanor continued. "It's about partnership. It's about choosing each other every day, especially on the hard days. It's about building something together that's bigger than just romance." She paused, her eyes finding Rebecca's table. "I've watched a lot of couples today. I've seen passion and drama and beautiful declarations, but I've also seen a young couple in the back of this tent working together seamlessly to care for 3 babies. I've seen them trade off feeding and changing diapers without being asked. I've seen them communicate with just a look, support each other without hesitation, and do it all while making it look easy." The tent had gone completely silent. "That's what marriage should look like," Eleanor said softly. "Not the fairy tale, but the reality. The partnership, the teamwork, the quiet love that shows up in actions, not just words." She raised her glass. "So here's to Marcus and Vivian. May you find in your marriage what we've all witnessed today in the back of this tent. May you build a real partnership, not just a perfect Instagram post." The toast was met with uncertain applause. Vivian looked like she wanted to throw her champagne glass. Marcus looked devastated. And Rebecca felt tears prick her eyes, not from sadness, but from the unexpected validation. David leaned over and kissed her temple. "Your ex's mother just became my favorite person," he whispered. After Eleanor's speech, the atmosphere shifted. The wedding lost its triumphant edge and became awkward, tense. Guests who had previously avoided Rebecca's table now flocked to her, expressing congratulations and obvious approval of Eleanor's message. During the dancing, Rebecca was feeding Sophie when Marcus approached their table. David tensed beside her, but Rebecca placed a calming hand on his arm. "Can we talk?" Marcus asked. "Just for a minute?" David looked like he wanted to refuse, but Rebecca nodded. "I'll be right back," she told David, handing him Sophie. She walked with Marcus to a quiet corner of the garden, away from the party. "You seem happy," Marcus said without preamble. "I am. I always thought—" He trailed off, running a hand through his hair. "I thought you'd be devastated, that you'd spend years pining for me. That's why Vivian wanted you here, you know. She wanted to see you broken." Rebecca felt a flash of anger. "And you went along with it?" "I didn't want to invite you," Marcus admitted. "But Vivian insisted. She said it would give her closure, seeing you watching us get married. And instead she got to watch me with my beautiful family," Rebecca said. "Funny how that worked out." Marcus looked back toward the tent, where David was visible through the sheer curtains, gently rocking Sophie while chatting with Eleanor. "He seems like a good man." "He is. He's patient and kind, and he shows up every single day. He changed his entire life when he found out about the babies. He never once made me feel like a burden." The implication hung heavy between them. Marcus had made Rebecca feel like a burden constantly toward the end of their relationship. Too needy, too emotional, too clingy. "I made a mistake," Marcus said suddenly. "Not about Vivian. I do love her. But the way I handled things with you. The public humiliation. I was cruel." "You were," Rebecca agreed. "But it led me here. So in a way I should thank you." "Don't," Marcus said bitterly. "Don't be gracious. I don't deserve it." One of the triplets, Oliver from the sound of it, let out a wail from inside the tent. Rebecca immediately turned, her maternal instincts kicking in. "I need to go," she said. "Rebecca," Marcus called as she walked away. "For what it's worth, I am sorry. And your kids are beautiful." She turned back. "They are. And thank you for the apology, but I want you to understand something, Marcus. I don't forgive you because you deserve it. I forgive you because holding on to anger would only hurt me. I have too much good in my life now to waste energy on what you did 3 years ago." She left him standing there and returned to her family. The wedding wound down early. By 9 o'clock, guests were starting to leave, and Vivian's carefully planned reception was falling apart. The bride herself had disappeared into the estate house, reportedly in tears. Marcus sat at the head table alone, drinking champagne and looking miserable. Rebecca and David packed up the babies and their extensive gear, said goodbye to Eleanor and Robert, who both hugged Rebecca tightly and cooed over the triplets one last time, and headed to their car. As David strapped the car seats in, Rebecca looked back at the Rosewood estate. The fairy lights were still twinkling, the music still playing, but the magic was gone. What had been intended as Vivian's triumph had become something else entirely. "Do you feel vindicated?" David asked as they drove home, the babies already asleep in their car seats. Rebecca considered the question. "I feel grateful," she finally said. "They wanted me embarrassed and broken, but I showed up whole and happy. That's not vindication, it's just truth. My life is good. Really, genuinely good. And no amount of their malice can change that." "Your mom was right," David said with a smile, referencing a conversation Rebecca had had with her mother when the invitation first arrived. "Living well really is the best revenge." "Except it's not revenge," Rebecca corrected, reaching over to squeeze his hand. "It's just living. And living well is its own reward." When they got home, they went through the familiar nighttime routine. 3 baths, 3 pajamas, 3 bottles, 3 lullabies. By the time all 3 babies were down, Rebecca and David collapsed on the couch together, exhausted but content. "So," David said, pulling her close, "how do you feel about never attending another one of your ex's life events?" Rebecca laughed. "I feel excellent about that plan." Her phone buzzed. A text from Eleanor. "Thank you for coming. Seeing you so happy, seeing those beautiful babies, reminded me what really matters. I hope you and David and those precious children have a wonderful life. You deserve it." Another buzz. This one from an unknown number, but the message made it clear who it was. "You win. Happy now? V." Rebecca deleted the message without responding. There was nothing to say. She hadn't been playing a game, so there was no winning or losing. She had simply lived her life, found happiness in unexpected places, and refused to let others' cruelty define her. "Everything okay?" David asked, noticing her expression. "Everything's perfect," she said, and meant it. As she lay in bed that night, listening to the soft sounds of her babies sleeping in the next room, and feeling David's warmth beside her, Rebecca reflected on the strange journey that had brought her here. Marcus's betrayal had devastated her at the time, but it had also freed her to find something better, something real. They had wanted her embarrassed, broken, diminished. Instead, she had arrived whole, multiplied by 3 tiny miracles, and inadvertently shown everyone what real love actually looked like. That wasn't revenge. That was simply life, lived well, despite everything. And in the end, that was the greatest triumph of all.